Okay. So, hello and welcome to the 40-minute session. Okay, so this afternoon, okay, or this morning, depending where you are, we're going to be taking a look at the well, it's FortiDB overview, but I'm focusing particularly on the data activity monitoring. There's been quite a lot of presentations with regard to the vulnerability assessment. So I want to take this opportunity, because it's just a small window, to look at the DAM functionality, and also to introduce some basic labs that you can also set up yourself in your own facility. Okay, so we're going to look at just a simple scenario that you can replicate with very easily, okay, which will allow you to test some of the functionality we cover here. Okay. So I'll just introduce myself. So my name is Michael Strickland, and I'll just send you my email. I recognize some of your names. Okay, so my email is coming. So if you have any questions after this session, I think you may have. I recognize a couple of names there. Okay, please contact me. And also, if you want the slides that I use, if you want to attempt some of the labs in this session, and you want the slides, then just please send me an email, and I can forward those. To you. Okay. So before we start this session, I just want to really just go around the few of you and just ask what level of FortiDB experience you have already. Okay, so have you installed the device? Have you already tested, etc.? Could you just give me some idea of your experience so far? If you could just send this to the chat window. Are most of you new to the product? Nothing? Okay. Okay, thanks. So I've got a couple of responses from there. Okay. So I see. Okay, so people have installed and tested and played with it a little bit. Okay, so we're going to basically look at some of the key features here. So maybe from this you'll be able to demo the product a little bit. Okay, we're going to show you some sort of concrete examples of setting up policies, so getting the monitoring working and setting up policies. Okay. So, as I said, we're going to focus on the DAM functionality, and we're also going to set up a lab at the end, which you can replicate. Okay. So, FortiDB is broken up into sort of three major areas. So the first thing that we come across is the vulnerability assessment. Okay, so the vulnerability assessment we have sort of discussed in previous presentations. There's quite a lot of sales material related to this. So this is the database vulnerability scanner. Okay, so we build, first of all, we identify our targets, which apply equally to data activity monitoring. So we identify our targets, and then we run various scans, depending on the type of database, against that particular target. We run these on a periodic basis, and then we do basically a baselining. So we're looking for vulnerabilities, but we're running this over a period of time. So we're not just looking at one instance, we're looking at a trend of data over a specific time period. Okay. We then have the monitor and auditing. So the monitor and auditing basically comes from the data activity monitoring. Okay, and this can come from intrusive or non-intrusive mechanisms. Okay, and we have alerts and auditing, monitor and audit. So monitor basically assumes there's going to be an alert. There's going to be some sort of indication something has happened which we want to know about, and there's going to be some form of indication. Okay, so that is the let's say the monitor, where there would be an alert associated. We also have a type of another type, which is for the DAM, which is the auditing. And the auditing is basically we have rules, policies that capture data that are relevant to an auditing requirement, and that data we store, and then we run compliance reports on this data on periodic basis, and then this information that we have, people will obviously have to sign off against. They'll be given lists of the activities that have taken place, who's done them, And basically, someone would have to sign off and validate this is acceptable usage. Okay, so this is the area points 2 and 3 here. So that I really want to focus on in this short presentation. So data activity monitoring. So with this functionality, the FortiDB has the ability to examine both live and historical audit data. Okay, so where the audit data comes from is also quite important. I've mentioned intrusive and non-intrusive, so look at that a little bit further on. Okay, and basically that data we have, where are we? Where are we looking? Do we want to just look at DDL statements issued? Do we want to look at particular modifications on tables? And if so, whereabouts? We've obviously got to focus. Where are we going to focus on? What sort of information are we concerned in? So this, we're going to look, heavily at making policies here and testing this. So for the data activity monitoring, essentially, we're looking at just the simple elements of a database. Okay, so if we think our database, we have tables where the data is stored, we have users that can access the tables, and we have permissions assigned to users to allow them to read or write to tables. These are some of the fundamentals that the FortiDB will tracking. We obviously work with the single logical unit of data, which is the row in the table. Okay, so we're looking on activities that may be related to the data definition, so the creating tables, creating columns, etc. Or it could be actually putting data into a table. So it could be a data change that comes from an activity, whether by a user directly or via some sort of stored procedure or trigger. Okay, we have the actual metadata structure, so how the database is organized, how the data is organized within the schema. Okay, so we understand that tables have columns, and those columns have values, different data types. Tables are grouped into schemas. So all this sort of terminology is important. Now, again, you don't have to be a DBA to use the FortiDB. The FortiDB is really aimed at the info security team. So these concepts, and often it's secure to consider a separation of tasks, that you would have the FortiDB run by the InfoSec team and the actual database administration by a separate team. We wouldn't want the database administrators to be able to change the logs and so forth. Okay, so edit the logs. So we have that kind of separation of tasks. So that means that, the knowledge of the database is less. Also, we use a very simple way, an industry standard JDBC connection. Okay, so it's a simple connection to a remote database to run these tests. Okay, and then also the concept of database transactions and sessions, looking at how these a group of actions are grouped together in a transaction, and analyzing. These are all elements that we would also analyze within this structure. Okay, so these are the core things. So these are just the basic building blocks of databases, which are obviously important to the FortiDB operation. Okay, so the DAM policies, what do they monitor? Okay, so the DAM policies are essentially looking at the access and modification of tables or specific columns. Okay, so specific columns is important because it might not always be the full table. In fact, you've got to be very careful. You don't want to be looking at too much information. You want to really focus on what's key to your organization. Because if you're looking at too much data, then it's the usual thing. It's too much data, like for example, too many traps. You just don't know what is a real issue. Okay, so we really want to, to reduce. There's going to be a large volume of data coming from this DAM module. So we need to really focus on what's key. What is a real issue that we need to know about or act upon. We can monitor particular users, the session activity of those users. We can look at any changes to the database schema. We can look at also changes to users or roles or their privileges, via privilege statements. Okay, so all this can be monitored, and we can obviously monitor on a period. We're monitoring all the time, and we can look at these changes over a periodic time and so forth. We can have immediate alerts, and we can have long-term audit message storing to run reports to get information out, typically as I say, for compliance reports. So key factors, as I say, monitor particularly for the user data, so the data policies. Focus on the right data. Okay, look at the key areas, the critical data, okay, and focus on that area so that you reduce the number of alerts that you get, okay, and just increasing more auditing or the more policies that match, as we've got the auditing information, but the more policies that match and actions, we're just increasing the work and increasing the tasks to acknowledge. So there's a question here, what with SQL and Oracle, we can audit all this. So what is the benefit with FortiDB? Well, the audit method, I'd say the audit method, SQL and MS SQL and Oracle have built-in audit capabilities. Okay, the key benefits here, obviously, are how intrusive is that audit. Okay, and who's doing that audit? So by having a separate device, you can have a separation of tasks. If your DBA is doing the database audit, then you're going to fail typically any compliance requirements because that task should be different. Okay, so that task, whoever's doing the auditing, okay, whoever's enabled the auditing, shouldn't be the person who's also the DBA, because then they can change those audits, they can edit the logs. Okay, there's going to be a separation of tasks. So that's one benefit. Okay, also there's the performance requirement. Okay, and the performance requirement is obviously SQL and Oracle require on native mechanisms where we have non-native, non-intrusive, let's say, mechanisms. So if we look at Oracle, we can switch on methods that are native that will add a bit of, will increase utilization, or we can look at non-intrusive methods, okay, or less intrusive methods, okay. For example, with the appliance, we can use the sniffer mode, okay. In the sniffer mode, we're just using normally some sort of port monitoring we're going to intercept, and we're going to look at these requests. So this is really the lowest of them all. This is the least impact on the client-server relationship. Okay, so this is another benefit. Okay, and also there's the standardization. Is rather than having different databases, each with their auditing capabilities managed separately, and then maybe different scripts or different different tasks per database, you centralize the whole thing, and you monitor, and you actually monitor the databases from that central location. So you've got that view over heterogeneous databases. You're not just dealing with Oracle or MS SQL separately. You have a heterogeneous approach to working with the multiple databases, and also there's the reports, the actual reports that are generated. The reporting is very important, particularly for the compliance, and that's a real value add to have these pre-formatted reports that will work with this data. So in some cases with the DAM, we're actually using the native auditing mechanisms. We're getting that over to the FortiDB, and then its own alert rules and has been processed on there, and its own auditing reports to generate very value-added services. So I hope, Ali, that somehow answers your question there. We're going to go into these a little bit further. Okay, we're going to look at each of these. Okay, thanks. So just coming back to the presentation, obviously, really, keeping down notifications is important. You're going to see, obviously, you're going to do a demo, you're getting a few notifications. It's nothing. But when you have, very generic rules that match a lot of operations, then it's going to be difficult wading through all this information. Okay. So policies are the key thing here. Policies define how the database is monitored, and policies will have what is being audited, okay, and then maybe an alert. So there may be some alert. It may be just simply the action. A grant, a create table would be enough to generate an alert, okay, or maybe it has to be done by a specific user, or has to have some specific data, etc. So we can have, very granular. It just depends, okay. So whereas like data policies are usually very specific to what they're looking at, whereas maybe metadata or privileges policies would be quite generic to those changes happening on a database. So as I say, we can look at table access modification, table column access modification, user sessions, session actions, okay, and so metadata and privileges. These are the areas we'll focus on. So, the auditing, let's just for a minute, we won't focus on how we get it. We just say, okay, we've got this auditing information. Okay, so I have this information now, and I'm going to process it. Okay, so I'm processing my rules against it. Okay, so I have this audit data, and I run my rules against it. Okay, and if I get a hit, okay, then I have some action. So, at a very high level, a monitoring policy is going to generate an alert. Okay, if we're monitoring, then there's going to be an alert. There's going to be some indicator of this. Okay, there's going to be an alert mechanism and some maybe remedial action. Okay, from that alert. For an audit policy, it's just simply it's going through the alert, the audit output. Okay, no matter how it gets it, and then it's saving that, storing that. That's of interest. I'm going to store that for future reporting. So I go through all the audit output, I extract what's interesting, and I store it in a location for future reporting. So one of the key ones here, and probably the most important ones to demo, is the data policies. Okay, so the data policies, you create them because obviously every database is unique. So you have to create the data policies for the database that you're protecting. So we have policies that focus on tables, table columns, users, and sessions. So we're looking at these elements, and we're using these policies to guard against specific modifications. Okay, so when a change happens on a particular column and it maybe falls in this value or something like this, or I want an action taking place. Okay, so these are all user specific to the customer's schema. Metadata policies are basically looking at the DDL language, okay, so the data definition language statements, okay, so the creating of tables, adding columns, deleting tables, etc. All this type of modification. As I say, even privileges, which we have a privilege section for that as well. But metadata policies are, changes in the schema would be captured by the metadata policies, okay, and then the privilege policies would be, creating users, grants, etc. So as you add more access to users, to databases, etc., all this will be tracked by the privileges policies. Okay, and then the compliance policies, basically we create rules that are going to collect data. So we have to say what we're auditing, okay, and it's going to look for certain types of activity, and then it's going to save those. It's going to save that output. Okay, those matching events, which we can then report on at a later date. Okay, so as I say, we're going to see in the example creating data policies first. Okay, so we're going to look at identifying the objects to be monitored. So in our case, we're going to take one of our schemas and we're going to say, right, I want to monitor all the tables in this schema, and I want to monitor for read access and read-write access. And I can, as I say, I'm going to focus just on tables, but we could actually make it more specific and look at particular table columns and so forth. Okay, so we're going to define the objects, and then we're going to define the rules that will generate an alert. So yes, this object has been modified, but that doesn't mean it's going to generate an alert or it's going to match the policy. We define the specific rules, the conditions that when this happens, then it matches. Okay. So let's just look at some of the methods for monitoring and how we monitor. So this is a key thing, and probably any troubleshooting you may have to do will be getting that initial communication working between the FortiDB and the database that you're expecting to receive the audit data from, okay, or you're trying to intercept. So we have some of the methods we use. The first two, basically, we have the first method, DB extended. Okay, so DB extended is one of the native methods of Oracle. Okay, so we can use this. We can store the audit information essentially in the database, and we can use the JDBC connection to retrieve that. We can use the XML file agent. Okay, so basically we use the XML storage locally, and then we use the agent, okay, locally to actually, rather than the FortiDB polling the server, the agent will periodically send that information to the FortiDB. Okay, so we have the SGA agent for Linux implementations. Importantly, in 4.2, we have the span mirror port, so basically port mirroring. Now, this is a DAM really should be non-intrusive. A real DAM solution will not require auditing switched on. Okay, so this is the this method where we're basically intercepting. Obviously, we have to send these requests in clear text. But if we have a trusted network and we can send between the application and the backend database, and it's a trusted environment, so we can send that clear text. We can then basically configure the FortiDB to intercept that, well, to receive that, okay, to have a span mirror, to have a TCP sniffer mode and intercept that from the port mirroring, okay. So then we can run the rules against the intercepted traffic. For MS SQL, DB2, Sybase, they all have a native tracing capability. In some cases, the agent is required because it has to initialize the transfer from the server, okay? And they all support the TCP/IP sniffer, which is the mode that is essentially a true non-intrusive DAM. So the various methods and their benefits. So if we look at the DB extended, okay, this is probably one of the simplest to implement. No, the data the data collection is currently or was previously clear text. There was I don't know if it's just it's definitely currently or previously was clear text, and there was plan to implement a secure transfer of this. Okay, I would say historically it was clear text. I'd say it still is. I don't know if that's actually been implemented yet, but I will check that. So again, if you could just send me your email addresses so I can respond to these questions afterwards. Okay. As I said, that was definitely an item. Okay, but I'm not sure if that's in 4.2. Okay, so the method, so the simplest one was DB extended. Okay, but this is non-intrusive native, but the main concern here is performance. Okay, so the key thing here is to, this is a great demo. It's a simple thing to set up and show, okay? But as I say, there may be, customers may be reluctant to do this. The other method that's less performance impact, okay, than the DB extended, is the XML. So it's basically formatting this output in an XML file. This is considered a less intrusive operation than the DB auditing, okay? So it's native, okay, let's say, so it's to some extent non-intrusive. Well, it's native, okay, so but it requires enabling the audit on. So it's intrusive. It's non-intrusive in the sense we don't change anything, but it's intrusive in the sense we need to switch this auditing capability on and use something within the database. The disadvantage of the XML is that it requires the agent installing, because the XML output is just basically stored to a local file, but the agent is required to take that file and send it to the FortiDB. Okay. So we have the network agent. Okay, so the network agent could capture protocols. So basically, on the device, it can see the incoming connections. Okay, we have in the other protocols we have the sniffer capability, and then the various native SQL trace and the SGA. Okay, these native audit capabilities. So probably the one that's really talked more about for the DAM now is the sniffer. The fact that we can, you don't have to switch auditing on in the database. You can use the output. You can use the output from the port monitoring to intercept and to process these rules. Okay, there's obviously the potential that some data could be lost here. Okay, so again, this one is can only be demonstrated with the appliance. Okay, so certainly it's not one we're going to look at in this presentation because we're using the standalone version for obviously just for the simple test. Okay, that you can all try. Doesn't require access to hardware, but this is a very interesting feature to talk about with customers. So FortiDB, so it's a Java-based application that uses Java database connectivity, so the JDBC API to connect. So it can connect into a heterogeneous DB environment. We can standardize our communication. Okay, obviously to communicate with each database would need its own. Each one would have its own native API, but we use JDBC as an API. Therefore, we can use a standard approach just to connect and interoperate with these databases. Okay, so over the JDBC connection, we can use SQL queries to connect to get the audit data when it's retrievable within the database. Okay, we can define our polling interview, so how frequently do we poll for that data? Okay, and as I say, it's a standard API, so widely supported, and it's simple. Again, it simplifies the development and the support for this. Okay, so essentially we have a three-tier architecture. Okay, we talk about the server application, okay, the DBMS, and the client. So the client, in the case of the FortiDB interactivity, well, the application for us is FortiDB. It's still a similar type of three-tier architecture, whether we're using JDBC to actually connect and input data, or in this case, we're actually using this to retrieve the auditing information. So here we can see exactly the application server, the JDBC interface, the connection to the database, and then obviously that connection is active, so we can retrieve data here, and then our application here, which in this case is the monitoring, can report to the client. Okay. So the agent is an additional piece of software that's installed. So it's intrusive in the sense that you have to install something, whereas the network is completely non-intrusive because you're just sniffing packets. Okay, so it's intrusive up to that point. So we're installing it on the host that's collecting the audit data. So usually the audit data is being connected to a file that can't be recovered by JDBC. So we have to use the audit the agent to get that file and to send it to the FortiDB. Okay, so here we see again we have a polling frequency, how often we're going to connect to the files, look for the information, and then we send it across. So the agent is basically read-only file permissions. Okay, it doesn't connect to the database. In the case of Oracle, it doesn't connect to the database. Okay, it's just reading the audit log file and sending it back using the JDBC connection. So it gets the information from the target database, okay, from the file system, and then it's using and it's basically sending that back via JDBC to the FortiDB for it to process. So here's an example Oracle system with DAM collection points illustrated. Okay, so one of probably the key ones here, the sniffer mode. If I'm using Oracle as the example for this POC. The agent is available with the download. So when you download, that's actually a good point, that, because it's available. When you just download the trial version, I'm not sure it proposes the agent as well. Okay. Have you already downloaded the standalone version? Okay. What I'll do, I'll send. Okay. Let me look. The agent. Yeah, the agent is certainly, I would imagine it is on the support site, okay, if you have a registered unit. But if you're using the standalone version just to demo it, then you don't get the agent. So I just wonder if there's any other link you can get that. Again, I'll include that in my response to you. Okay. I'll have a look for the public resource and send you that. So where we can access from, so this is one, if we were in TCP sniffer mode, we would see this on the, here we're looking at the TNS over a TCP IP socket. This would be one inspection point, okay, simply packet sniffing. If we're using some form of agent, okay, we can use maybe a net agent actually on the host, okay, or we can use some sort of agent that's actually looking at files outputted output via the RDBMS system. So once you've defined your targets, we're going to look at adding for the vulnerability assessment or the DAM, you add your targets. So these are the databases we're connecting to, and you define the user you're going to connect as to do the vulnerability assessment or to do the DAM. Okay, and then if you're enabling DAM, you have to say what is the method you're using. Okay, and then you have to start monitoring, and it will connect and try and access the data. Okay, so this is quite an important slide because it shows you when you start the DAM process, it will show you the status of the DAM. So you can see just visually whether it started. Maybe it started, but some rules haven't started. That's generally okay. Has it all started and all rules are acting correctly? If you see something like this, it can't connect. It's not receiving anything from the remote agent. In the case we need the remote agent, so you need to look at the logs. So if you go into your target and look at logs, you have the audits, which is the messages from the policies, and then you have the logs. And the logs is telling us where we're having connectivity problems with the database. We need to go through this to try and identify what the cause is. Okay. So for the PoC environment, we're going to use a very simple implementation. Okay, so basically we're going to take a Windows 2003 server, 32-bit, with I'm just going to use just simply for a basic implementation is the Express edition of Oracle. So using Oracle 10G Express edition, which comes predefined with the standard. Whether you're using doesn't matter which version of Oracle you're using, you have this option for the standard HR schema, which is what we're going to use for this presentation. Okay, so we're going to install this on our Windows server. Okay, and we're going to install the trial version of FortiDB. Okay, so the trial version, just the standalone version. Okay, which is available as a demo, and also the agent. Okay, now as I say, I will send you the URI where you can recover this agent from, because I believe it's probably only available on the support site when you have a registered unit. So for this example, I'm going to show you. Then we're going to use the XML extended collection method. Okay. So in order to do this, we have a few changes we need to make. Okay, so first of all, we need to enable, because the XML extended is actually using some of the native capability on the device. Okay, we actually have to enable in the parameters to use the audit trail XML extended. Okay, so we log in as a sysdba, and then we alter that setting. Okay, so alter system, we set audit trail XML extended. Okay, and also we look at where that audit file is, okay, for the XML file. This is important because we need to be able to access that file afterwards. So we do show parameters audit file dest, and that will tell us where we can access the file. Now, one thing we just have to validate is that the agent has the permissions to access that file, because obviously the agent has to recover that file and send it back via the JDBC connection to the FortiDB. Once you've made that change, you have to do a reboot. Okay, so just shut down and start up the database. Okay, then you need to install the agent. Okay, so prior to actually configuring the agent, you need to first of all ensure that the account you're going to use has access to that audit file destination parameter, and also you have to have Java installed. Once you have these two prerequisites, you can then unpack the agent to a directory in an account identified within those prerequisites, and then you make a config by copying the sample config into the config directory, and as a minimum you change these 5 settings. Okay, so define, in this case we're using Oracle XML, and we define the various addresses of the agent, the broker, the polling interval, okay, and this gives us this communication. Then we have the agent speaking with the DB, so it can recover that information, okay, and then speaking back to the FortiDB. So we then have to install the service. So we do the FTP agent install. Once you do that, there's now a service installed in this case in the Windows services. So we have to start the agent, okay, once it's been installed, okay. So if you do this from the DOS prompt, you will see a wrapper output telling us that the service has started. If you don't see this, then you need to go back, look at the permissions, looking at the file, the account that this is running as, can access the audit file, etc. So we need to, once we have auditing enabled on our database, we can then start the monitoring. So first of all, we need a target, okay? So if the target wasn't defined already, we need to define that target. So here we're just saying have an Oracle target. We're using the Express edition, and the default database name is XE, and then we use our system account, which is created during the install, to connect. So rather than generating a specific account for FortiDB, I'm just using the system account. So I'm going to enable DAM, which is actually enabled by default. Once I've entered all that information, I can just do a test connection, and you should see a success status that we've managed to be able to get that to make the connection to the database. In this case, this doesn't test the DAM. We haven't yet said what the DAM method is. All that we've done is connected successfully, logged into the database via the JDBC connection here, but we haven't gone any further. So now we need to enable the data activity monitoring. So if we go into the DAM menu and we click on targets, click on monitors, sorry, then we'll see our targets. So we click on our entry that's just created, okay, and we specify what the mechanism is, okay. So under our general configuration, we specify the collection method. So we're telling FortiDB how it's going to retrieve the audit information. In this case, we're using the XML file agent, okay? So it's expecting to be able to A, open the JDBC connection, and also B, be able to communicate with the XML agent. Okay, once we've defined how it connects, okay, we can then look at defining some of our policies, okay, so what do we want to monitor? So we're going to start with, these are some of the predefined. We have metadata and privileges policies. We're going to add some data policies. So data policies are all custom. You have to create them for your particular schema. So we're going to add some basic data policies for the HR schema, which is included with Oracle on a basic install. Okay, and we're going to create a couple of rules, one for read access and one for write access, okay, with different severities. So here we see our read access rule, okay, so we create the rule, give it a description, enable it, and then we specify what are we auditing, what are the audit settings. So we say, okay, obviously we have the JDBC connection open now, so we can connect and look at the schemas available. So we say, okay, I'm looking at the schema HR, and I want to monitor these tables. In this case, I've selected all the tables with read access set to true, okay. Then I've defined some alert rule, okay? So I can have, there's like a Boolean relationship here, so it can be and or, so either all rules must match or one of the rules must match, and then the alert will trigger, okay? So I can put some criterion related to a particular violation, time violation, suspicious locations. In this case, I'm going to do a user-based. So I'm looking at, in this case, I want to see if the system user enters select statements on these tables I want to see, okay? And that's basically what this rule gives me. I'm then going to create a second rule for write access, okay? So the write access, I'm going to create a second data policy for insert, update, and delete statements, okay? So again, I select the same tables, I enable the write option, okay? And we see that this is now, and I select the same tables again, so I have two rules. One for read access, one for write access. And again, in this example, I want to look at any user, okay? So what I've done is I've said basically alert any successful access if the user is not specified in the above list, and that above list is empty, so all users would be flagged. Okay, then I start monitoring on my target. Okay, so when I go back to the target monitors, okay, I see my device. I click on the device, I select the device, and select Start Monitoring. Okay, at this point you will get some status information whether the monitoring is working or not. Okay, And if there is a problem, if you don't get this 2.5 bar or 3 bar green, then you have some connectivity issues, so you have to verify your logs. And those logs are located, I'll just go back a couple of slides. Okay, sorry. Those logs are located here. We have alerts and we have logs. So logs here, we have all the information for this target, for the JDBC, the agent connection to this target. If we can't connect and audit, then the error message will be printed here. Okay. So now we have that, we have the JDBC connection open. We've set up the auditing. Now all we have to do is log in as a user and make some changes. So I'm going to just log in as a standard system user without SysDBA privileges. I'm going to run some basic commands. So I'm going to view data in a couple of tables, and I'm going to insert some data into a table and delete data from a table. Okay, so I have write and read operations. Okay, so these should be flagged. Okay, so here I see in my logs, I see the HR table policy access. Okay, so I see here this was the access, and here I see the statement that was sent. Okay, so this is just a log. This is an alert. Actually, this is just an alert message, but I could generate a notification for this. There could be an SNMP trap, an alert mail, or something like this could be generated from this message. Okay, I also have the insert statement, so I have a write, so a modification, and here I see the insert statement that was captured. Okay. Also, there was an error in my configuration. Here I have a write policy with a select statement. And this is because in my write one, I said I'm looking at read and write. Okay, maybe I don't want that behavior. And in this case, I can say, okay, well, let's disable the write. The read and look at only write. So I've got one rule for reading and one rule for writing. Okay, so maybe that was a mistake in my configuration. So as you build these rules up, you may find, oh, hang on, that's not behaving quite as I wanted it to. Okay, so here we see those rules are now active. Okay, and those rules, in this case, because I made some changes, okay, so the rules are active. But because I made changes, for example, I modified that rule where it was actually picking up, it was a write rule picking up select statements. So I'll make that change. Because this monitor is running, I need to restart that monitor, and that's what this restart option will do. It will restart the monitor, and I can do those changes. Okay. So other types of policies is the privilege and metadata policies. Okay, so these are quite simple. Rather than actually having, you just say what you're auditing, but there's no real alert condition. Okay, you just I'm auditing the HR schema, and the table's in there. And if there's any changes to the tables with regards to their metadata structure, so the columns, new tables created, if I create new users and grant privileges to these tables on there, then I want to know about it. And that's what these basically say. So the rule definition is quite simple, okay? And then when I make some changes, so I create a table, I allow somebody to view it, then I start to get some flags about that behavior, so privileges and metadata. Okay. So these are all alerts. So actions were changed. I execute some statements. I get an alert mechanism, an alert output. Another key point. This is sort of step 3 of the diagram we showed at the beginning. Is the compliance policy demo. Okay, the compliance policy. Sorry. So the compliance policy is basically is the policies required to run the compliance report. So here we're looking at purely reporting. We're not going to have any alerts on this. We want to be able to generate a report of all these actions. There may also be other alerts that would capture on this. Okay. Yeah, question there about the different types of DAM policies. Essentially, probably the user guide, admin guide gives probably the most information on the differences. Okay, the differences are really, as I say, related to you've got the basic types of policies, so the data, the actual data in the policy, the metadata, the privileges, etc. There's a fairly generic overview of what each one of these are, and and a definition for them. So I'd recommend that you just look at the 4.2 admin/user guide for this, just to get a clear, and also the other policy types, just to get a clear distinction of what they are. Okay, so and again, the compliance policies, which again are really there just to provide the information for the compliance report. Okay, so I definitely refer you to the admin guide for that. So the key thing here is obviously adherence to compliance practices and generating reports for audit requirements. Okay, so periodic reports. So we can use these policies. We enable a policy group, and policies within that group will be applied to the target that will be used to generate the data for these reports. So here I'm going to say, okay, I see my policy groups. Okay, so these are multiple policies. I'm going to say I'm going to select my compliance policies, and I'm going to move it over here, and that's going to enable compliance policies on my. So I've got my selected policy groups, and I see that these are now added. Okay, so I now have the compliance policies enabled. So basically, these are just generic policies which I then have to customize to the target that I'm then going to be viewing. Okay, so I've added those policies to the list. I've now got a new entry here, compliance. Okay. Now that's just taken from copying a standard policy from the policy group. Now I need to edit that. So this is a compliance policy. So I'm going to customize this for my HR schema. So say, okay, right, I'm looking at a definition of what it is. Okay, so HR tables compliance, enable the rule. And then what I'm looking at, so I'm looking at abnormal changes in the data, okay, in the service accounts and so forth. So these are the policies. This is what this policy does. It tells you what it's looking for, and you basically tell it where to look. So in this case, we're saying look at all tables of the HR schema, okay, and look at both read and write audit actions. And also you can narrow it down a little bit. So here I'm actually focusing on two particular users. I'm focusing on the system and the HR user. Okay. So once that's done, okay, again I make those changes. I then obviously have to restart the monitor and I configure new policies. Okay, so when I create that policy, I click the restart, and those policies will now be implemented on that target. Okay, so I make a few changes similar to earlier. So I basically insert some value into a data, delete that value, and then I have to, although I may get alerts for that, my interest here is actually seeing my compliance report. Okay, so I go to compliance reports and I have my predefined reports. In this case, I'm going to look at the abnormal or unauthorized changes to data report. I'm just going to leave the default values and click export, and this is going to give me a PDF. Okay, and then this PDF will list, as I say, the activities that have taken, the database we're monitoring, the activities that have taken place. Okay, and this is formatted in a proper report for the various compliance requirements. And again, this would allow this data to be reviewed via the auditor. Okay, so we've sort of over in our 40 minutes there. So that's a very quick overview of this functionality. I still got some questions in the window there, so just have a look at those. Okay, so let me just run back. I may need to, usually the questions, it's often good to speak with some colleagues and then send you a response back. Okay, so when I create a target, what are the permissions of the user I want to give him to connect to the database? Well, essentially, again, in the admin guide, it tells you about the particular, depending on what sort of activity you're doing, privileges, metadata, compliance, etc. It will tell you the particular permissions, so what type of database you're working on and what permissions will be required to that user in order to capture the activity. So I can give you some links to that in the document. So this is the user that we create specifically. Obviously, in this simple demo, we're just using the SysDBA account. But that's obviously in production. We're going to create a user that's associated with the FortiDB, that's associated with the InfoSec team, who's going to connect and run the audit on the database. Okay, so I'll just give you my email. Generally, no, he doesn't have to be an administrator. Okay, you can give it reduced privileges from the DBA. The simple example is obviously just use the DBA privileges, but obviously to run these, it depends on what policies you're using. You will need different permissions. Okay, so just sent you my email. So it's mstrickland@fortinet.com. Okay, so I'll be really interested to get your questions on this. Obviously, FortiDB is one of our new technology products, and it's great to get the feedback from partners and customers. Okay, so if any questions, please send them to me. I see there was a few questions in there that I probably replied to during my presentation, but I will answer them anyway and send them back to you. So please send me your email so I can get back to you. I hope that was a useful presentation for you. And as I say, I maybe look forward to seeing you again on another web-based presentation. So please send me your email so I can follow up. And again, if you have any suggestions or other things you'd like to look at FortiDB, or even other sort of short training sessions that you'd be keen to receive, please let me know, and I will maybe look at getting those scheduled. Okay. Okay, well that completes this afternoon's presentation. I hope it was interesting for you. So it's a pleasure speaking to you, and hopefully see you again on another session. Thank you very much.